Hello students, we are going to be talking about personal statements today. So this chapter is really focused on personal statements in applications to school, whether that be a four-year university, whether that be a master's program or a doctoral program for a PhD. So that's the kind of personal statements it focuses on. But this is also relevant for a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs you'll write something like a cover letter or a letter of intent that might not include everything you would put in an application for a school, but a lot of this is overlapping and really relevant. So hopefully you take some good notes and you can learn a lot today about personal statements, what to exclude and what to include. Some of those things to exclude are maybe very important as well, equally or sometimes more important than things to include. So let's get started with this. Generally, a personal statement is the first thing that a person sees when they're going to admit you into their school or they're going to let you in for a job. So it's a first impression where you can describe yourself, your interests, your skills, your experiences, and your career goals. So what is it that you're bringing to the table? What is it that you want long term or from this kind of program? So with that, it's also called a candidate statement, an autobiographical statement, a letter of intent. There are different names for this, but they all come down to the same thing. There are also a lot of freedom in writing these. It's not as formulaic as, say, a resume, where it's kind of like organized by dates and things like that, and kind of job types. So there's a lot more freedom here. And with that being said, some programs or some jobs, so some academic programs or some jobs might ask to see specific things in a personal statement or a letter of intent. So some general recommendations here are consider this like a face-to-face interview. This is a first impression, a first chance for the person reading this personal statement to get to know you, to get to know who you are and things about you, to get to know you personally. So introduce yourself in your personal statement. Let them know who you are. Explain your particular interest in psychology. Why are you interested in psychology? What specifically within psychology are you interested in? That's really important, especially in an academic program where you might be trying to apply to a clinical program or a developmental program. You really want to spell that out of what kind of program you're wanting to get into and why are you excited about that type of program. So also another good thing to include here is the kind of research experience you have. So do you have any research experience? Talk about it. Do you have teaching experience? If so, talk about it. If it's being a TA, if you did teaching at a kind of other level or in another way, talk about that and how that helped you. Clinical experience, if you did an internship, things like that, internship with these other things too. Did you do, like I said, an internship, or did you volunteer? Are you doing volunteering or an internship that's relevant to the field that you're wanting to go into? Or did it help you see that that's not what you wanted to go into and you took a different path? That's one thing that kind of happened to me as I did an internship and then I worked in the field one-on-one with clients in a more clinical focused setting. I realized that I was going to get burned out really quickly, and so that wasn't a good path for me, so I kind of shifted trajectory from that. Um, so that can be really helpful and really useful to talk about in something like a personal statement. Also, let them know, especially for an academic program, your kind of career plans post-graduation. For a job posting, maybe what are the kind of career goals you have within this place that you're applying. So with this is a big list. You might be hearing this whole list, you might be seeing this whole list of bullet points and being like, I only have one of those, or I don't even feel like I have one of those. That's okay. You don't need all of these experiences to be competitive, like we've talked about before within the field. The things that you do outside of class to try and build your skills or use your skills in different ways can really help to seal the deal for jobs or even internships or getting into grad schools or four-year universities, those kinds of things. So anything extra that you can do and you can fit into your schedule can be really beneficial, especially when you're talking about it and letting these people know, hey, I did this is what I learned, or this is why it made me excited about doing X, Y, and Z. So a couple other general recommendations: be concise. So short and sweet is great. A really great short statement is going to be better than a good long one. So this is one problem that I tend to have in my writing. I tend to write more to try and explain in more detail to make sure I'm really clear when I can go back with later drafts and cut things out. And it can still be really clear, but it's now a lot shorter. So maybe that's not a problem you have. But be concise. A great short statement is better than a good long one. So don't include info that's clearly available in other places. So if you're including a resume, you've probably got your GPA on there or GRE scores. So you don't have to say that in your personal statement. It wouldn't work very well when you're trying to introduce yourself. Your GRE score is probably not very central, or your GPA is probably not super central to who you are as a person and why you fit, the skills that you're bringing to the academic program or the job. So emphasize exactly what kind of experiences have prepared you for or made you exciting about the further learning you're going to do in the developmental program that you're going into or the clinical program you're going into, whatever it might be. Let them know why you're excited about that. What experiences have prepped you for this? Did you do a little bit of research? Did you do a little bit of clinical work? Let them know. Then let them know that you're excited. So look at the requirements also for each personal statement. With that, they might have, you might be applying to 4 different schools or 10 different jobs. Each of them might have slightly different requirements or not post any requirements for their personal statements. I've seen those things. Oftentimes the word count should be in between 500 and 700 words. So that's like a little less than 2 pages to a little over 2 pages. So I would try to stay like a page and a half. Again, if it can be short and sweet and really good, that's going to be even better than an almost 3-page personal statement that isn't as good. So make sure you're writing it in APA format or MLA format, or if they have a specific kind of format that they're asking for, make sure that it's consistent and professional looking. They will often, but not always, talk about specific topics they want to address. Like for an academic program, they might want to know what is your experience in the field with regards to research or teaching. So they might also say specific topics to avoid. So it might be something that they hear so much or that is pretty common of people within that field coming into that kind of position or academic program that they don't need to hear about it. Also, there might be specific things that they don't necessarily want to hear about as well. So it might be possible that they could ask specifically for your GRE and GPA. So this kind of goes against what I said a minute ago. You don't want that in there probably because it's not central to who you are as a person and the skills you bring to it. But if they ask for it specifically, you should include that. But I've seen people talk about personal statements asking for that, but I've never actually seen that in the wild in real life. So you might encounter it, probably not. Don't forget to modify your personal statement for each application that you do. So with that, the specific training or experiences that make you really good for one program might be slightly different than what you are really good for another program. As an example, as I was applying to grad schools, I applied to some social psychology programs and a bunch of developmental psychology programs, and the one I got into was the positive developmental psychology program. So each of those programs had a little different focus within either social psychology, developmental psychology, or positive psychology with that developmental focus. So each of those, I had different skills that I kind of, or I tried to at least, I tried to emphasize it that it fit well and it made me excited about that specific kind of learning at that institution. So that is what you should do. Also, make sure that if you're including the names of schools or specific professors that you might want to work with, make sure that it's accurate for the school or the job that you're applying for. It would be really, there was one time I was almost sending in an application, but I just double checked my writing and I realized that I had kind of a form letter of a personal statement that was really similar across job applications, and I realized right before I sent it in that I hadn't changed the name of the school I was applying to teach at. So I changed that, luckily, before I actually sent that in. So I didn't make the mistake, but I almost did. So let them know why you're applying to that specific program or, again, that specific job. What do you hope to accomplish in this program? specifically, what could you do in that program? What are their focuses? What are the skills that the professors there have, or the resources that they have that you couldn't do in others? If there is a developmental program that has access to and researchers that work with an MRI to do brain scans, there's a lot of schools that don't have access to that, so that might be something to talk about. If there's a specific researcher in the field who's working on specific projects that are really relevant to what you want to do, talk about that. You couldn't do that at another school where that professor was not there. Or a job as well. What can you do there? What can you hope to accomplish? What can you do for that company specifically that you wouldn't be able to do at other places that makes you excited to work there? So specifically, a good thing to include here, and I've kind of alluded to it before today as well as in other lectures, talk about a couple faculty members that you might want to work with because of similar research interests or similar clinical interests, people who are working on the same kind of topics or issues that you want to be working on. So if I wanted to work on pro-social behavior, working with people who are doing pro-social behavior work in developmental psychology or social psychology is a really good idea. I probably wouldn't try to work with someone who is not doing things in pro-social behavior, as an example. So with this, especially if we're talking about a PhD program, and we'll talk about this in other chapters as well, especially for PhD programs, do not go into a program if your interests are not really similar to your advisor. It's going to just make it a lot harder to make it through that program. It's going to be more difficult to get into that program in the first place. For PhD programs, it's generally an advisor is essentially the mentor of a few students who they're kind of taking under their wing, giving them their skills, and helping them develop their own research, kind of under the research that they're doing, or generally very similar to the research that they're doing. So sometimes it's quite a bit different, but usually it's pretty similar. So if your research interest is not really similar to your advisor, it's probably not worth applying to that school, because that advisor will read it and be like, well, you want to work with me, but it doesn't really make sense based on what you want to do and based on what I want to do. So because of that, even if you're a great candidate and you would do well in a PhD program, if you're not a good fit with that person, that they probably wouldn't admit you. That won't be as relevant for, say, a master's program, because you usually don't have one individual mentor in a master's program like that. But especially for a PhD program, that's a really key piece of this personal statement. So with this, the main point here is to be persuasive that you're a good match for that program, for that job, and try your best to be enthusiastic about it. It can be really stressful to apply for jobs or apply for schools, but it's also exciting to be taking those steps, to be making those decisions of what you want to do for the next couple of years of your life at a school or in another job. So that's really exciting, and working with someone or working in a field that you want to be working with and that's really neat. So be enthusiastic about it in your personal statements. So again, master's programs might not be as concerned with the fit between faculty and students. Obviously, if you're going into a master's program in developmental psychology, or a master's program in clinical psychology, or a master's program in industrial organizational psychology, your interest should be around in that kind of area rather than in another discipline of psychology. So with this, speaking with current students is a really good way to get a sense of what the kind of programs are actually doing, and if it might be a good fit for you. You can find current students sometimes in, say, the labs of professors there. So if you go to the professors' pages, like contact pages, or just search them up at the different university, oftentimes they will have a page like with a bio. It might have a link to a lab or something like that. You can go there, and oftentimes they will have like a people in the lab, or like this is us kind of page. So you can find those students, email those students, maybe look at papers, like so some of the research papers, the main professor might be one of the authors on the paper, maybe the first or second or third author is one of their students. You could probably find their emails that way. So email students, ask them about it. If you email 4 students and 2 or 1 get back to you, you have a little bit more knowledge about the program and whether you should or should not apply to that. You can also do this for jobs. Interview people in the field that you want to work in, even the exact same job that you want to get if possible, to see what it's like there, to see if that's something that you'd want to do, what kind of skills would be useful to kind of talk yourself up to get into that position, what are they really looking for at that job or at that school, can be really useful. So things to leave out, these are also important. What should you leave out of your personal statement? Make sure you haven't included anything meant for another program accidentally. This goes back to my earlier anecdote that I almost included the name of a different school's program in one of my job applications. So don't do that. Bad idea. One big thing that I want to make an emphasis on is for not just for clinical programs, really for any program. In psychology, a lot of us get motivated to do psychology because we're interested in maybe even our own mental health. Maybe we had mental health struggles and that caused our interest in psychology. So with that, you can definitely mention it, but avoid lengthy discussions or disclosures of your mental health struggles. So keep it brief, keep it simple, keep it positive as well, because this can raise red flags and cause questions about why you're applying. I'll give an example to make this a little more clear. So when I was helping interview for, as I was leaving the clinical internship I was working with, we had the chance to help in the interview process. So there were like the main actual interviewers. It was a big group interview. So it was the actual, our advisor through the internship was the primary interviewer. There was the faculty connection to the school that was interviewing these students as well, and then us, the students who were currently the interns that had been through the internship. And so we were interviewing new people potentially going for there, and one of the students talked really in depth, at length, of their own mental health challenges. And if they had just mentioned a few things, probably wouldn't have been a big deal, but the way that they talked about it for a longer time, maybe they were nervous, and they kept diving into it in different ways, it made us wonder, hey, does this person need to have the kind of help that we're giving to people? Are they ready for this kind of setting where they're going to be under additional stresses? They might encounter people who had some of the same experiences they did, those kinds of things. And had they mentioned it in kind of a positive light, that, hey, it sparked my interest, and now I want to do work to help people too. That would have been great. But the way that they talked about it, giving more disclosures, like disclosing things that you wouldn't generally tell someone on, say, a first date kind of thing. You want to disclose even less than that in a personal statement, essentially. With that, it made us wonder, is this person actually ready for the internship? In the end, it was the decision of, we gave our input as the students, and it was the decision of the faculty advisor and the internship supervisor to let them on or not. I believe they did let them on. It's been a few years now. So what should you do if that is your motivation? And that's fine. That's a lot of people's motivation. Be brief, to the point, and focus on positive outcomes, possibly how it motivated you to learn more about psychology and help other people. So that's kind of some maybe vaguer words or way to say it. This is a really good example of a previous student's personal statement and how they gave a brief disclosure of mental health struggles and end with a positive motivation and desire to help. So pause this video here and read over this. It does a really good job here talking about, really briefly, some mental health struggles, seeing that that these mental health struggles were around them as well, that it wasn't just them, and that they saw a need for more help in the community that they were in. And so because of that, because they got some help and they saw the positive outcomes from that, it motivated them to go and do more work in psychology and help other people as well. So pause it really quick, take a look at this, read over it. This is a good example of just really briefly, like surface level, talking about their mental health struggles and how it motivated them and how it was relevant to what they want to do in their career. Hopefully you did pause it and look over that to get a good sense of what to expect from giving a brief disclosure of your mental health. Might not be the perfect example, but I think it's a pretty good one of just briefly discussing it, not going into too much depth, and showing how it was motivating to go into the field. So with this, as you write a personal statement, have people review it. So this goes with all your writing. So we have a writing center that you can give your writing for whatever papers that you're doing for classes for review from them. Look at the rules. I don't know how many days they need to do it. For my grad school, it takes, they say for like shorter than 15 pages, they'll get back to you in like 3 days. For up to 50 pages, it'll be a little over a week. So look at that on the Writing Center. But also, you can have other people review your statement. So have faculty members, especially if you have a faculty member that you feel is a mentor to you. Ask them to review your statement. Give them, have them give you feedback on what you're doing well, what you could beef up in there, like what experiences or skills that they think you have that you've excluded. That could be a really helpful thing for writing your personal statement. You can also ask current students that you know. You can ask peers, hey, can you read my personal statement? I want your feedback. How does it look? Would you hire me? Would you admit me into your program academically? Those kinds of things. Also, make sure you ask friends with good grammar or spelling skills. So as you've probably noticed on some slides, I might not have the best spelling skills. Sometimes they're bad enough that the autocorrect and spell checks don't know what I'm trying to write. So with that, have friends with good grammar and spelling skills check over these as well, because that can just help a little bit more too. The Writing Center can do that as well. You can pay editors to look over those kinds of things, spelling and grammar as well. But while you're in school, generally you'll have things like writing centers to be able to look over things like grammar and spelling, if that's something that you struggle with, like myself. All right, so that is all for personal statements. Hopefully that helps you feel a little more confident and comfortable in writing your personal statements. Again, I'll go back to, I think one of the main points of this is that you are essentially giving a face-to-face interview on paper. You're introducing yourself, you're talking about your interests, you're talking about what skills that you have, what you want to gain from an academic program, what kind of career goals you hope to attain with that academic program or with the job that you're applying for. You can talk about your experience and the things that you're bringing to the table to make you a good candidate for those things. So think of it as a face-to-face interview on paper, and I hope that will help. Again, you don't need all this whole list to be competitive in any of the things that you're applying to, but the more that you have, the more that you can get, the better. But if you only have one or two of these things, or even right now if you have none of these things or don't feel like you have any of these things, that is okay. There's still plenty of time as you are in school to work on getting these kinds of skills.